This woman killed her multiple husbands and son for money and almost got away with it. This case left me baffled. It's actually insane. Hi, I'm Meg. I talk about your crime. Let's get into this case. So today we're talking about Judy. This is her last name. I have no idea how I'm even meant to pronounce it. I don't want to butcher it. People referred to her as the Black Widow. She was born on the 4th of April, 1943 in Texas. The name given to her at birth was not Judy. It was actually Jedias Welty. And her childhood was traumatic. It was bad. When she was only 2 years old, her mom died of tuberculosis. From 1945 to 1955, Judy and her younger brother were sent by their father to live with their grandparents, and their 2 older siblings were put up for adoption. When Judy was 12 years old, her father remarried, and her father would end up taking her and her little brother back in and moving them to their new house in New Mexico. So she now lived with her younger brother, dad, new stepmother, and 2 stepbrothers. The treatment she received in this house was apparently atrocious. She would be burnt with SIGs, made to work long hours in the house, starved and beaten. I do not understand how you could do that to anyone, let alone a child. But it wasn't long until Judy reached her breaking point. In 1957, when she was only 14 years old, she had had enough, and she threw hot grease onto her stepbrothers and attacked her stepmother and dad. She was arrested and spent 60 days in jail. And instead of going back home after those 60 days, she asked the judge to send her to a juvenile center/school. It was a reformatory juvenile center. And she would graduate there in 1959 and cut all ties with her entire family. But unfortunately, the damage was done. At only 17, she changed her name to Anna Schultz, started working as a nurse, and got pregnant. She gave birth to her son, Michael Schultz, in 1961. The father, still unknown to this day, but she would end up giving him up for adoption. Only a year later, she met a man called James Goodyear, fell in love with him, and married him. Together, the couple had a son called James Jr. and a daughter called Kimberly. And eventually, they actually adopted Michael, her first son, back into the family. Judy's husband James was in the Air Force, and so he did a tour in Vietnam. But only 3 months after returning from his tour in Vietnam, James fell ill out of nowhere. He went from incredibly healthy to incredibly ill like that. And the doctors just couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And on the 15th of September 1971, James passed away from natural causes. Judy was clearly mourning her husband because it took her 5 days to cash out his life insurance money. She got $28,000 from the life insurance and $60,000 from the veteran benefits. Oh, and get this, only a month later, her house accidentally caught fire. Get used to the word accidentally. So she was able to get another $90,000 in insurance because of the house fire. So Judy's over here thinking she found a quick cash hack. And she was not going to stop with her first husband. She then met Bobby. She took the kids, she moves to Colorado with her new man, Bobby. So she met him in 1972. 1974, Bobby gets really sick. And the doctors are unable to figure out what's wrong with him. Bobby spent about a month in hospital, and when he was finally seemingly better, he was discharged. But then somehow, 2 days after coming home, he dies of cardiac arrest. Now I want you to guess what Judy then did. She cashed in his life insurance. At this point, people were a little bit suspicious of Judy, but they literally couldn't prove anything. And also, you have to remember that she moved to Colorado with him, so no one knew about her first husband either. So people were a bit but they didn't really think too much into it. Now, if you think that's bad, what she did to her son Michael was so much worse. So Michael was the first son I mentioned, the one that we don't know who the father is. Judy apparently really didn't think highly of Michael. He wasn't the best at school. He misbehaved a bit as a kid. He looked up to James Goodyear. That was, I guess, his only ever father figure, which was Judy's first husband that she unalived. And so when Michael was older, he actually decided to join the army himself. In 1979, he was assigned to a base, and on the 6th of November, he decided to drop by his mom's house before going to the base. So he spent some time with Judy and then made his way to the base. But for some reason, his health suddenly started declining the moment he got there. The doctors actually discovered very high levels of arsenic in his system, but by the time they discovered that was there, the damage was done. Because of the damages, Michael required to have prosthetics on his arms and braces on his legs. He was no longer able to walk, and these braces on his legs were metal and super, super heavy. And because of all this, he was discharged from the military. I'm pretty sure at this point he might have moved in with Judy, and one day she thought, I'm gonna take you out for the day. Judy's plan for this day out was to take Michael and his brother out on a canoe ride. But out of nowhere, the canoe capsized, and Michael's metal braces on his legs were so heavy that he sunk to the bottom of the lake, but Judy and her other son managed to make it out alive. Can we just all collectively agree that Judy's literally the worst for that? That is horrible. An investigation took place, no signs of foul play, apparently. Judy cashes in $20,000 in life insurance. She then meets the final man in the story, John. John was rich, and Judy lied about her entire backstory to him. At this point, she actually was using the name Judy, however you say that. Apparently, this is a translation of Goodyear, which was her first husband's last name, which is crazy. She convinces John to take out life insurance, just in case. One of her lies to John was that she was a military nurse. And so she started really taking an interest in his health, saying that he needs to take better care of it, offering him these new vitamins. But soon after John started taking these vitamins, he actually got hospitalized. But luckily for him, he didn't die in hospital. They were able to help him out. They weren't really sure what was causing it though, but he stopped taking the vitamins. In June of 1983, Judy announced to John that she was pregnant. And he was so excited, and he thought that he should go out to the shop, get some champagne to celebrate. But this is where it gets, once again, insane. He gets in his car to go and get the champagne, and when he turns the key, in his car, it explodes. John was immediately rushed to the hospital, given surgery, extensive surgery, but he survived. Judy at this point was probably like, what? I find it really bizarre though that Judy changed her MO like that. Because the moment the authorities checked the car, they were able to see that was planted. By that, I mean a car. I don't know if I can say that on this app. So all of her lies fell apart literally so quick. So quick. Her pregnancy being one of those lies. John, understandably, fuming. But he remembered that he had actually kept some of those vitamins that Judy was giving him, and he handed them in to authorities to get them tested. Those vitamins had really dangerous ingredients in them. Ingredients that humans are not meant to be ingesting. The materials used to tweak the car were found in her house. She was arrested, and then finally, they connected all, and I mean all, the dots. She never admitted to any of it, by the way. If I was the judge, I'd be like, Judy, be fucking for real, come on. After many, many attempts of gaslighting the jury into thinking she was framed. By whom? By who, Judy? She was obviously found to be guilty and sentenced to death by the electric chair. So glad that John survived that. If it wasn't for all the screw-ups with him, she probably would have got away with all of this. I just think at that point she thought she was, untouchable. She thought she could get away with it. But no. You couldn't, Judy. Let me know what you think of this case in the comments. Let me know what case you want me to cover next. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Do you remember that one scene that everybody talks about?
And which one?
Terrifier 2, the bedroom scene.
Yeah? I'm never gonna forget that. That specific scene constantly like
plays in your mind.
Yeah, bro.
And the way that she was ripped, like,
her arms were ripped off, her scalp was skinned off, bleach on her soul. Even though I know it's fake, just can't handle the gore.
that scene scarred a lot of people. But the director, right, when he was trying to think of ways that art was gonna murder people, he was trying to get inspiration from medieval torture methods back in the day, right? Then he came across this picture of what used to be a body on a bed. How he described it was, it didn't even look human, bro. Come to find out that that picture was a victim of Jack the Ripper,
The infamous
serial killer that was never found.
from the UK?
Yes. So he got inspiration from Jack the Ripper. He tried to like think of a way how that could have happened, because I'm gonna show you the picture.
Fuck.
Yo, I don't think you're ready for this, bro.
I'm not ready. What the fuck?
The original picture is black and white. This is the colorized version.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's the original picture right there.
Yeah. Yo, let me know if you guys like that shit. Like, I know a lot of people are into the whole gore stuff. And shout out to the TikToker who I learned that from. It's Jiggy Saws.
Talk about a movie that subverts your fucking expectations. God damn. I finally got around to watching Strange Darling because it's available to rent now. I rented it on Amazon. I was just reading some reviews for this movie and people were saying that it was predictable and they saw the twist coming immediately, and like maybe I'm just dumb, but it fucking came out of left field for me. It got me. It absolutely shocked me. I went into this movie expecting one thing, like thinking I knew where it was going, and just completely got something different. I'm obsessed with the storytelling method behind this movie and how the story unfolds. So this isn't giving anything away, but this movie has 6 chapters, but it doesn't tell them in order. Like, it's completely non-linear. So it starts at like chapter 3, and then it jumps to chapter 5, and then 1, which sounds like it could be confusing, but it works. And it's what made the twist so effective for me. Let's talk about the performances, because let's be real, I'm gonna fucking like anything that Kyle Gallner is in. I have loved that man since Red State, since Haunting in Connecticut, really. But Willa Fitzgerald, man, she fucking killed this role. And more importantly, the chemistry between them is so good, because this is one of those movies that if it didn't work between the two of them, the movie wouldn't work as a whole. I fucking loved this movie, man. I love how unexpected it was for me. The cinematography behind it is beautiful as well. This movie gave me very much Tarantino vibes, specifically Kill Bill. And I mean that both in like the imagery and the set design and the use of color, but also in the way that the chapters are told and how it's non-linear. My one regret about watching this movie is that I did not see it in theaters. I didn't get to see it on the big screen, and now I'm kicking myself in the ass for it. Overall, I give this movie a 9 out of 10. I fucking loved it. This is my favorite movie of our Lord and Saviors, aka Mike Flanagan's. Let's do it. I did a super intense deep dive of this movie and The Shining on my podcast, by the way, if you're interested. So Dr. Sleep opens up in 1980 and we meet this little girl named Violet. Violet makes the mistake of wandering off into the woods where she encounters Rose the Hat, who is going to be one of our main characters. And Rose and crew attack and eventually this little girl. Also in 1980, we meet Wendy and Danny Torrance. Wendy and Danny are trying to recover from their trauma that happened to them at the Overlook Hotel, of course we know from The Shining. And we see that Danny is still being haunted by the ghosts of the Overlook. But one day, little Danny sees the spirit of Dick Halloran, who teaches him a trick to get rid of these ghosts. And he teaches Danny to lock them up in a box inside of his head. So then we jump to 2011, where we meet an adult Danny, now going by Dan, and we see he, like his father, has become an alcoholic. We see him wake up next to this woman who is passed out in bed and her young child is there. And later on we learn that the two of them died and he just left her. So this kind of wakes him up and he moves to New Hampshire for a fresh start. And he meets Billy, who sets him up with a job and an apartment. And Billy also introduces Dan to Alcoholics Anonymous. Danny gets a job as an orderly working at a hospital where he gets the nickname Dr. Sleep. Now, we know from the Shining movie that Dan shines, meaning he has this psychic ability. And he, along with this cat Azrael, are able to foresee when patients are going to die. And Dan uses this gift to comfort the patients as they pass away. In 2011, we also meet this young girl named Abra, who also seems to be able to shine. And her parents learn this about her at a young age. And she begins to telepathically communicate with Dan through this chalkboard in his apartment. While this is all happening, we learn more about Rose the Hat and her group, who is called the True Knot. Rose the Hat and her lover, Crow Daddy, are scoping out prospective people. And they find this girl named Snake by Andy who has the ability to push, meaning she'll say sleep and the person falls asleep. And they take her and they turn her to become one of them. So basically this group is this immortal cult, and they survive off the steam of children. But these children have to have the ability to shine. And this is why they went after little Violet in the beginning. And they put their steam in a canister and feed off of it, which keeps them living pretty much forever. And the way they get the steam from the children is causing fear and pain. So we cut to 2019, Dan is 8 years sober, Abra is a teenager now, and the True Knot is still all the same ages that they were in fucking 1980, and they're still going after kids. One day this group is drawn to this boy named Bradley, who we refer to as the baseball boy, because he shines. And in one of the most traumatic scenes ever, they violently off him and take his steam. And it's so violent that Abra wakes up screaming as it happens. So she's like telepathically connected to it and she knows that there's this group. So she telepathically alerts Dan, who she now refers to as Uncle Dan. They're still writing back and forth on the chalkboard. So Abra tries to look in through Rose to see where this group is, where they're going. And one day while grocery shopping, Abra is able to telepathically put herself inside of Rose's mind, but Rose catches her. And Rose tells Crow Daddy there's this girl who knows about us. She has the biggest steam I've ever seen. We need to have her. So now their goal is to make Abra their next victim. So Rose one night astral projects and manages to get into Abra's mind. But it turns out it's a fucking trap and Abra injures her, but then is also able to get in her mind to see her memories and learn more about the cult. However, through getting in her mind, Rose now knows where Abra is. So she sends the members of the True Knot to go get her. Now, Abra and Dan haven't even physically met in person at this point, but Abra seeks him out and finds him. She tells Dan all about the baseball boy and is like, I know where they buried him. If you go and get his baseball glove and bring it back for me to touch, I can find out more about this group. So Dan recruits his best friend Billy and they set out to Iowa to go dig up this kid's body, which they do find. So they go back to Abra's with the glove where they meet Abra's father, who thinks they're just fucking creeps. So Abra has to project these images like of the baseball kid and of the group into her father for him to understand, and he does. So Abra, her father, Billy, and Dan set up this plan. And they set up this operation where they lead the True Knot to this specific area in the woods, making them think that Abra is there. But she's not, and as they realize that, Danny and Billy start shooting from the tree line and taking them all out. This bitch Andy, as she's dying, looks at Billy and tells him to kill himself. And remember, she can push, so he does it. This is one of the saddest deaths in movie history, I don't care. Billy deserved better. Abra, who's looking in on this from the safety of her own home, realizes that Crow Daddy isn't there. And sure enough, she wakes up to find Crow Daddy in her house killing her father. And he kidnaps Abra and takes her to drive her to Rose the Hat. Dan, however, is able to telepathically take over Abra as she's in the car with Crow Daddy. And he, as Abra, crashes the car, which then causes Crow Daddy to fly out the windshield and die. So now Rose is literally the only True Knot member left, and she is fucking pissed. And Dan knows Rose is going to be coming for them. So he picks up Abra and takes her to the one place that he knows is very dangerous for people like them, including Rose the Hat. And that is the Overlook Hotel, which is now abandoned. So Dan knows he has to go inside and wake it up. So he enters the hotel and he goes to the boiler room, and he sets the temperature purposely for it to overload. And he wanders through the hotel seeing everything for the first time since he was a child. Mind you, they literally took the blueprints from Stanley Kubrick's original set, so it's an exact replica. Danny, like his father, eventually makes his way to the bar, where he is confronted by the spirit of his father, Jack Torrance. But Danny is able to be stronger than his father was, and he refuses to take a drink. So Rose the Hat arrives and confronts Abra and Dan. But they have a trick up their sleeve, and they get in her head and send her into this snowy hedge maze, which of course we recognize from The Shining. So Abra attacks Rose and they try to lock her in one of Danny's lock boxes. But she sees what they're doing before they're able to do it, and she wakes up and snaps out of it, so it doesn't work. So she goes after Dan in this scene that mirrors The Shining, where Rose the Hat is Jack Torrance following Wendy up the stairs, who is now Dan. Rose hurts Dan with the axe, which causes him to fall down the stairs, and she gets on top of him and starts to take his steam from him. And she tells him, I don't know how you got away from us as a kid, because as an adult, the steam gets corrupted, so it's not as good. That's why we go after children. But it's at this point that Dan looks at Rose the Hat and is like, there's something that you don't know about this hotel. There are spirits here that are dangerous for people like us, and they're starving. And we see all of the little lockboxes in his head being opened. And all the spirits from the hotel come back and attack Rose. And they feed on her steam and kill her. But then, of course, it can't just end there because they have to set their attention on Dan. The spirits of the hotel possess Dan, which causes him to go after Abra with an axe. So now, again, he has become his father. When he finally corners Abra, Dan is able to have the power to come through and be himself for a moment, long enough for Abra to run away. And then Dan is possessed to go to the boiler room, and the hotel tries to possess him to turn the boiler off. But he once again regains control and he stands back and he watches as the boiler explodes. As the fire starts to blaze around him, he has this vision where he becomes a child again and he is comforted by his mother. And meanwhile, Abra escapes and looks on as the Overlook burns to the ground. Sometime later, we see Abra back at home in her bedroom and she's speaking to somebody. And the camera pans and we see that she's speaking to Dan. But Abra's mom comes in the room and Dan disappears, so he's not there. He did die in the blast at the hotel, but he still visits Abra, kind of like Dick Halloran visited him as a kid throughout his life. Abra tells her mother that after we die, we go on, and Dan is fine, and so is Dad. The final scene is Abra looking at her bathroom and seeing the woman in the bathtub from The Shining, which we saw child Danny see earlier. And she goes in the bathroom and closes the door so she can lock her away in a lockbox like Dan taught her, and the movie ends. This one is such a hidden gem, let's do it. Anything for Jackson is about this older couple named Audrey and Henry Walsh who are grieving the loss of their grandson Jackson. Henry is a doctor, and at the beginning of the movie we see them kidnapping his pregnant patient Shannon and tying her up in their house. Because it turns out they are Satan worshippers and they have this plan to perform a reverse exorcism on Shannon so that their grandson Jackson can be reborn through her unborn baby. So they have obtained this ancient book that is thousands of years old from Jerusalem, and they paid a shit ton of money for it. So they use the book, they perform the ritual, which they think will put Jackson in Shannon's unborn baby. And then they just wait for Shannon to give birth. But weird shit starts happening to them immediately. Henry sees this apparition that he thinks is his wife, but when it turns around, it is this old woman with no teeth who is like violently flossing at her gums. It's fucking disgusting. Audrey is haunted by this apparition of this kid dressed as a ghost, which is the spirit that is pretending to be their daughter, because turns out their daughter was always a ghost for Halloween. And eventually they reveal to Shannon that their daughter was also in the car accident that Jackson was in. And though she didn't die in the accident, she couldn't deal with losing her son, so she offed herself. Shannon sees this really creepy, contorting man that has a plastic bag over his head. And one day, Henry witnesses their handyman Rory become possessed and throw himself into a wood chipper. On top of all this, Henry one day is confronted by Detective Bellows, who is investigating Shannon's disappearance. Henry makes up a bogus story, and you can tell the detective is super suspicious of him, so one day she shows up at the house. She discovers Shannon being held hostage, and she holds Henry and Audrey at gunpoint. But before she's able to help in any way, she becomes possessed and turns the gun on herself and pulls the trigger. So Audrey and Henry at this point obviously know that something has went very wrong, and they reach out to Ian, who is another cult member of the satanic cult that they're a part of. Ian examines the book and tells the couple that their translation of the ritual was wrong. And what they actually did was unleash this demon that unlocks the doorway of tortured souls. So now all the ghosts that they're seeing are these ghosts and spirits from purgatory that are fighting to come back to life. And they all want to possess a human host, so they are fighting to be Shannon's baby. Ian tells them that he can complete the ritual properly, but at a cost. And that cost is, in order to get Jackson back, they would have to trade another life for his. So of course Shannon is completely unaware of this, but they are planning on trading hers. So Ian returns to the house the next day, but we can see that he's become increasingly disturbed since learning about this book. And as Ian is performing this ritual, Henry gets a call from Yolanda, who is kind of like the leader of their satanic cult. She tells him to be on the lookout for Ian because he murdered his mother the night before and the cops are looking for him and he's absolutely lost his fucking mind. So Henry tries to warn his wife about this, but in the chaos and the distractions of this, Shannon manages to break free from her restraints and attack them. And on top of that, all the ghosts that have been haunting them are now coming into the room. And then Ian turns around and stabs Audrey in the stomach, making her the sacrifice for the demon to be reborn. But then Ian is attacked and offed by this new ghost, and he's dragged away from the room. So Shannon has freed herself at this point, and she's going to run out of the room, and she tries to get Henry to come with her. But Henry is sitting there with his wife's body completely distraught. And before he even knows what's going on, he's attacked by another ghost and offed as well. So Shannon witnesses this. She's standing there absolutely fucking horrified. And the contorting ghost with the bag over his head once again attacks her. Shannon manages to flee, but as she's trying to get out of the house, she encounters all the ghosts that we've seen the whole movie, including the detective, including Rory, including the ghost, and including the disgusting toothless woman. So a struggle ensues as they're all trying to attack her because, again, they all are looking for a human host. But ultimately, she is able to escape and she gets in the couple's car and she drives away. As Shannon is driving away, she looks up and sees this demonic figure in the road crossing into the woods. And she looks down and realizes that her water broke, and the movie ends, leaving us completely wondering about what her baby is going to be.
goodness sake, Mom! What the hell? Oh. Everything's on, I don't understand. Hello? Hello? What the? Oh gosh. I don't understand, everything's on. Tumble dryer as well, really?